You're live on the cloud. Now what? The journey is just beginning.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. I'm really excited today to be joined by Brendan McHugh and Nicole Oeser, a couple of other experts from our higher ed, Workday, and Oracle teams. And today we're going to be talking about your journey. You've gone live. Now what? It's a big question. You have to transition straight from that project life to steady state. So we like to talk about that a little bit with Brendan and Nicole today. So Nicole, the first question's for you, and I think it's really important, helping institutions understand what does that successful organization look like? You know, and there's an organization maybe that's successful at GoLive, but then has to maybe change or adapt as you move to steady state. So how do you view that, especially as someone that's been through a few go-lives?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. I think that at GoLive, it looks like all hands on deck. It's everybody who's been involved with the project. It's the project team, your call center you've stood up, your future support organization team members are absolutely involved in that. And then your campus experts throughout the schools and divisions. I think you've got all hands on deck at GoLive with an eye towards the transition to steady state. And the steady state begins to look more like the regular cadence of meetings with your users to continue that user success and to take in any issues and triage them with your support organization. And then that begins to lead to your regular governance to make sure that everything is staying aligned with those guiding principles.
Yeah, I really like that focus on the future, right? You got to get everything stabilized, but then let's move forward from there. So Brendan, clearly leadership is going to be really important for that, right? And some structure. So can you talk a little bit about the governance that is needed to make sure that that organization can be successful?
Yeah, sure. So, as we know about the cloud, it's all about continuous improvement. The first day of GoLive is day one of a journey. A lot of people talk about it as the end of a journey. It's the beginning. And so you have periodic releases by the vendors. You have enhancements that you want to make. You want to continue to build your cloud footprint. And fixes that you'll have to do. And so keeping that governance structure in place, having a strong governance structure helps you to put priority on what's the most important, what's next, and what's after that. So many cases, what we see is the same governance structure that you had in place throughout the implementation moves and transitions and morphs into a post-go-live governance structure. It may not be called a steering committee, it may be called an advisory committee, but a cross-functional, cross-campus, representative group of people to provide input on how do you set priorities for what's important in the post-go-live support model.
I like that thought. It's an evolution of something that's hopefully already been working. It's just changing a little bit. It's transforming. So Nicole, we've said this word a couple times already, but stabilization, right? That period right after go-live. Some may call it hypercare. What does that look like? I know you mentioned all hands on deck, but especially now where all hands on deck doesn't mean a command center. There's no one on campus, probably. So what does that look like, and how can organizations still be successful, especially given kind of the current environment that we're all operating in?
Yeah, I think it's been very interesting to live through these go lives in the virtual environment that we've done several of in the last few months. And what we've seen is that strong processes continue to be the key to success. You know that intuitively. What we've seen is that those strong processes where we have a really good flow of information from things that are happening in the system or with the users. And like you said, the users aren't on campus in these virtual go lives. They're at home too. So we're finding creative ways to support them from home, and stabilization really looks like having good, strong processes in place that keep the flow of information from what's happening in the system, what are the users experiencing, what do we need to follow up on today. So I think the strong processes support a really strong flow of information, and that is more important than ever and in the virtual environment we find ourselves in, to make sure everybody's got the latest and greatest information on how things are going.
Yeah, Nicole, I think it's all, you hit it on the head. It's all about meeting those users where they are, and which is hard to do virtually. It's easier to do in an in-person setting, but it's making sure that their first interactions with the system and then their continued interaction is positive.
Very well said. So one final question here, and Brendan, I'll throw it to you first, and then Nicole, maybe you'll have more of a Oracle viewpoint as opposed to Brendan's Workday viewpoint. But Brendan, you mentioned earlier this idea of continuous innovation, right? And that hopefully comes from your institution, but that's also going to come in the form of regular vendor updates. So what does the process look like when you transition to steady state and you need to be ready for those regular vendor updates?
Yeah, so typically it looks like, many of the features that come from the vendor are optional and some are required. And so in the lead up to go live, you're focused on making sure that your core scope works perfectly on day one. So likely what you have are a bunch of great new features that came out in the release or two prior to go live that you want to prioritize right out of the gate because they will improve business processes, they'll make things more streamlined, they'll make the user experience better. And so you've got a backlog of those kinds of things. What it looks like in the immediate aftermath of go live, as Nicole's kind of spoken to, is it's a frantic, all hands on deck approach, solving problems and helping users get used to the new system. So it's a great time period. It's a fun time period, but it's intense. You move to that periodic update and you've got a backlog of things that you want to be working on. What do we need to take on? What's required? And then do we have the bandwidth and the team capacity to start to take on those optional things that will really maximize our cloud footprint or the value that we realize from the cloud?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the, at a macro level what the process is. Nicole, I'm interested in your thoughts there.
Yeah, no, I think the same thing, that you'll pick and choose carefully which things you want to introduce to your campus, depending on how soon your release is after your initial go live. And then you will dole them out through the same channels that you've put in place with your regular user groups and with your groups that you are really doing the outreach with on a weekly basis. So it kind of just follows those same strong processes and has been surprisingly well received by our groups.
Yeah, I really like the theme, right, that I think a lot of your answers had, which is take the things that have worked during your project and just transform them in a different way for steady state, right? So I really thank you both for your time today and your insights, and look forward to our next conversation.
We hope this session helped you see through the clouds. See you next week.